how are you? Welcome on in.
Podcast by George.
Another podcast by George.
Podcast by George. Border to border, coast to coast. Podcast by George.
Hello, hi, how are you? Welcome on in to another podcast by George. Oh, we've got the internet acting up again this morning a little bit. Hopefully it'll play ball with us. And I'm hoping to get Emma Schmit on from Food and Water Watch here in Iowa. We've connected, and hopefully she'll be able to join the broadcast. It isn't a technical issue. I just haven't heard from her. She just hasn't come in yet. And if she doesn't, I'm just going to do a little bit of a rant, talk about these poisonous pipelines in Iowa. You may have read about how it's moving through the legislature. The vast majority of Iowans are opposed. Their representatives seem to be aware of that, but they're not really acting on behalf of their representatives. At least, the House is a little bit here in Iowa, but then it goes to the Senate, and that's kind of like the U.S. Senate. I mean, then you get into the big boys and girls, the oligarchy. I mean, the people that are acting for vested interests and not for the people. I'm not a big Senate guy, either on a federal or a state level. I'd like to see the Senate abolished and just go to a representative government and do what the people want. And the people don't want these pipelines. And we're going to be talking, hopefully here very shortly, to the great Emma Schmit on the Podcast by George Live line. There's her graphic. And for those that don't know it, Emma Schmit's an organizer for Food and Water Watch. She's one of those young activists that I really like because she doesn't just talk the talk. I mean, so many people, do Twitter, do podcasts as an example. She's out there walking it, man. She's on the line carrying a sign. And I really like that. She's doing the heavy lifting, trying to save us all. And she's going to be talking about one of the most crushing issues of our time. And it's, industrial agriculture, which has got a big role in this, the CO2 pipelines. And of course, big ag and the gag. And my God, it's just the rich get richer, the poor get poorer. And that, if that wasn't enough of an insult or an injury, the insult that goes along with it is we're the ones that are put in harm's way. So Emma, hopefully will be able to join us here. I've sent her messages on all of her social media to let her know that we're going live. And I'm going to go ahead and take off and cover this. And hopefully the internet will play ball. I want to encourage everybody to comment and ask questions because it could be just me today. But I've done that before, and I am used to that. Let me bring this article up from the Sioux City Journal. And they're on top of this pipeline situation because those pipelines are going to run right up through there. So it's amazing how people can get on point when they're affected directly. And before I read this article, I was going to tell everybody, my God, I watched the ABC television news last night with David Muir. I don't know. They have the little preview of what's coming up on the show about a minute. I was going to go out and find it and play it. It is a freak show. I mean, it's a horror what's going on, not only in the heartland, but not only in the country, but worldwide. It's just, it's Orwellian. I can't believe people look at this stuff and don't want to do something because it is terrifying, folks. The ABC nightly news. And then, of course, you got one of the bigger issues, and people are focusing on this angle of it a little bit, but it's, Captain Butt Crunch, Donald Trump. He's down kicking off his campaign in Waco, Texas. This is the guy that's under investigation, and everybody wants to hang from a yardarm for that insurrection on January 6th, 2 years past. Honest to God, Waco, Texas. You know what that is famous for? That's where Timothy McVeigh made his chops, basically, before he went and blew up the Mura building in Oklahoma City. What kind of person does that? That's where Trump's at. He's in Waco, Texas. You combine that with the stuff on ABC having to do with climate war. They're taking us to war in Syria with Iran. China is, on the bench, ready to come off at any time. Russia is already at war with the United States on a proxy basis, and it's getting more hot all the time via NATO. And so, oh my God, it's just, this is the, there's that icon. What in the hell is going on? Okay, well, let's get back to this story, and we'll get through this, and hopefully Emma will be able to jump in here very shortly. This is from the Sioux City Journal. Iowans largely united in opposition to eminent domain for the CO2 pipelines. So why aren't lawmakers? Yeah, good question. Why aren't they representing us? Out of the Sioux City Journal. At a time when the state is deeply divided politically, Iowans across, they're deeply divided politically here in the state of Iowa, but make no mistake about it, folks. We ain't blue. We ain't purple. We're red. We are solid red. It's a trifecta. I mean, it's a super majority here for the Republicans. Iowans across demographics are largely united in their opposition, Democrat and Republican, to private companies using eminent domain for carbon capture pipelines, according to recent polling. A Des Moines Register Mediacom Iowa poll conducted earlier this month shows a supermajority, nearly 80% of Iowans oppose allowing private corporations to use eminent domain to build the pipelines. The opposition crosses party lines. And then, quote from the great Emma Schmit, I personally am a Democrat, and we're working with folks on the ground that are staunch Republicans. Food and Water Watch senior Iowa organizer Emma Schmit. And that is one of the real interesting angles. The strange bedfellows here. We've got the Iowa Farm Bureau, of all things, lining up with these progressive left-wing environmentally concerned protesters like Emma Schmit trying to stop this thing. Now, they're trying to stop it for a different reason. Those right-wing or big ag factions they want to protect the interests of their members who don't want the pipeline companies just coming in and taking over a portion of their property. Quote, despite these very different political ideologies, we've come together because we can recognize there's power in uniting, even if we don't agree on all things, Schmidt said. The issue has forged unique coalitions of interest groups and made for some strange bedfellows, as I mentioned, in some cases, joining together those that often find themselves on the opposite side of agricultural and environmental issues in the state. I would say virtually always. I mean, it would be shocking to me if they ever line up, hardly ever at best, while splintering up. The Iowa Bureau, for example, has joined environmental groups and property rights advocates in support of a proposal that would restrict carbon dioxide pipeline companies' ability to use eminent domain to force easements from unwilling landowners, including farmers. Meanwhile, organized labor has joined industry groups, including the state's Renewable Fuels Association. Yeah, get this, because it's not all good news with, the big ag groups joining with the environmentalists. Labor is joining with the state's Renewable Fuels Association, corn growers, and ethanol producers in support of the projects, which will shuttle CO2 from ethanol plants to reservoirs deep underground, taking advantage of federal tax credits. And guess why? Well, it's the old, they're singing me, folks, because they want the business. They want the jobs that'll come from sticking those pipelines in the ground. And once they're in place, they're basically low to no maintenance till they blow up or leak or whatever. So the jobs go away. They're not permanent. And ethanol is bound to go away in 5 to 10 years, maybe 15 years or something like that anyway, because we're moving off of that stuff, folks. We got to get off. We got to wean ourselves off of the internal combustion engine, or we're all going to die from the climate catastrophe. Now, there are big-time political connections in play here. And again, this is where you have this interweaving, this circumstance that's of interest, not only in Iowa, nationwide, worldwide, for that matter. It reads, the pipeline projects also have deep political connections, including Bruce Rastetter, a major Republican donor and backer of Governor Reynolds, who leads Summit's parent company, Republican Terry Branstad, the sixth-term former governor of Iowa, governor for life, I think the great Donald Call named him, and former U.S. ambassador to China, is a Summit senior policy advisor. And Jess Vilsack, son of U.S. Department of Agriculture Secretary Tom Vilsack, a Democrat, serves as Summit's general counsel. So the ethanol industry has major influence over what happens in the state, said Food and Water Watch's Emma Schmit, as in evidenced by their access last year, passing a law mandating most gas stations to sell gas with 15% ethanol, known as E15. Man, that's impressive. That's flexing some muscle, folks. They're telling the gas stations what to do. We have a few really loud Democratic supporters, Schmidt said, while others are conflicted because we've seen a huge influx of funding for carbon capture projects coming from the Biden administration. Yeah, there's big bucks in play here, man. And I'm telling you, it's been my experience, and the golden rule rules. If there's money available, people are going to want to snatch it up, think for the moment and not the future. And that's what Emma is fighting with. It does seem to be the national level of a Democratic priority to support carbon capture technology, she said. Okay, great. Let me take that off screen here and get to a couple of other things. I got a message here from Emma. It looks like she is. Looks like she's not going to be able to join us, at least not anytime soon. So that's just the way that goes. Okay, so I got a little bit of drama here with the show. I wanted to bring this on screen. I'll take this off. And this is a video. And this is the Chinese, believe it or not, tested the pressurization that it takes to go into these carbon capture pipelines. Now, bear in mind, the stuff that's in there is lethal. I mean, really lethal. And it's odorless unless they put an odor in it. You can't see it. The first time you know you're affected by it is when you're sickened or dead. And this is, let me bring this up on screen. Okay, and I don't know what they had in that pipeline. It was just something for the test, maybe steam or water or something like that. But that gives you an idea of the spread of this lethal toxin, the CO2 gas that's inside of these pipelines. And what happens if you have a rupture? Makes me think a couple of things when I look at that. A rupture would appear to be more likely to me because of the high pressure. Now, they're going to construct them supposedly to contain that. But as we know, all full tube folks, all pipelines leak. They all, this one will too. It is going to happen. It always does. And that's where I mean, just think if you're downwind from that. I mean, think if that's your farm. Think if that's headed towards your farmhouse or your nearby community. It moves through the air. You don't know it's there until it's way too late. All right, let me go back here and add this back in and see if I can. Okay, this is who we're depending upon to, save us here. It ain't going to happen, folks. I was going to talk to him about this. I mean, the precedent isn't good here. Biden announced or denounced for appalling approval of the Willow Oil Project. You may have seen this, despite campaigning on the fact that he was going to contain drilling and there weren't going to be any more drilling projects in the Arctic and so on. Guess what? Yeah, man, we got to have her. That's what happened. Let's see here. U.S. President Joe Biden greenlighted a massive oil drilling project on federal land in Alaska, eliciting outrage from climate advocates who say the administration's accompanying restrictions on oil and gas leasing in the region cannot make up for the destruction set to be unleashed by the approved Willow project. So that's what's in the national news in the background. And would definitely be an issue, a part of this ongoing story. Yeah, take that off screen here. Again, I'm going to put out the call for the people that are watching here. The Wi-Fi seems to be tolerable, and it's not even Wi-Fi. I'm connected directly to the internet via Ethernet, if that makes any difference to technical folks. I'm not relying on unstable Wi-Fi here, but I do get a warning from StreamYard that we're probably getting a little stall once in a while. Hopefully the audio is going through well. I want to bring this up because it's out of my, well, not my favorite publication, but definitely one of my favorite publications, and it is Bleeding Heartland from the great Laura Bellin. And I put her stuff on screen when I'm interviewing her, and she's a great contributor, writer, and editor for this community blog. And emphasis on community blog here, because other people can write in and make their voices heard on Bleeding Heartland. Go there, bleedingheartland.com. And this is from a a fellow named Don Ray, and he contributed. He says CO2 pipelines, the same old, the same old. Yeah. Don Ray grew up in Fort Madison and has lived in Ringgold County since 1993. Can you imagine, says Don, rural Iowa or our state in general with reduced ethanol plants and 60% of the demand for corn gone? It would be truly devastating to our schools, hospitals, and roads, just from a tax perspective. So who said that? It was pipeline lobbyist Jack Ketzner from Summit Carbon Solutions at a legislative hearing last month. He was arguing that the carbon dioxide pipelines are needed to keep the ethanol industry afloat, which would support corn profitability and in the process save rural Iowa. Well, that's what they're telling us. That's what Don says we're being told. But Don goes on to write, the ever-increasing production of corn seems to have been Iowa's foremost agricultural goal for many decades. And how has that worked out, Don asks. Don says, I live in southwest Iowa, where the result has been ever-decreasing population and the decline of disappearance of churches, schools, gas stations, stores, hospitals, and on and on. Lobbyist Jake Ketzner's rural devastation has already happened, folks. To know this, just look around. And that really is true. If you just drive minutes south of Des Moines, you're going to find this. I mean, particularly where the soil gets poor, the yields aren't high, the big ag concerns aren't there, and you have all farmers still trying to shout a living on that lousy dirt and lousy mostly compared to the, north of Highway 20 dirt here in the state of Iowa. It's like going back in time. If you go over the state line into Missouri, you'd swear you were in the 1930s. Most of the downtowns and buildings are still there from the 1930s and 40s. And that's what Don is talking about. And he's showing this chart. Now, this is on screen for people listening in audio. You won't be able to see this, but it's population versus corn production. So the corn production is the jagged red line. Look at it going up. And then look at the population line dissecting here and just continuing to decline. You would think with all the money that is coming from corn production that the rural communities would not only be surviving, they'd be thriving. But they're not. Why? Because the money is going in the big pockets of the same people that are behind these damnable CO2 pipelines. He says the must-have pipeline that Ketzner champions is just the latest in a long line of must-haves for corn production and profitability. Bigger equipment, bigger farms, more chemicals, more fertilizers, genetically modified crops, price supports, crop insurance, concentrated livestock feeding, and ethanol production and destruction of the ecology, folks. Pollution on the scale of nothing humankind has ever seen before. Now, that's me, not Don saying that, but Don says the result is always the same. More corn, less rural vitality. The Iowa Corn Growers Association has a clever little slogan. Don says, quote, we like to say Iowa grows corn, but the truth is corn grows Iowa. For big chunks of the state where increased corn production has corresponded to decades of decline, a more accurate corn industry slogan for Iowa might be, we've got you hooked, junkie. And they're counting on the devastated junkie to buy the next hit. In this case, it is the CO2 pipelines. Yeah, that's the next hit for the junkies that are on the gravy train there, folks. And I grew up on a farm. I'm living in a rural state. I don't dislike farmers. I just dislike what's happening with big ag and the big corporate farmers, particularly the CAFOs and the swine production and these corporations that are buying up all of the farmland, making it so that your average Joe can't, or Josephine can't farm. The farmers of today bear no resemblance to the farmers of my childhood, of yesteryear, and they don't deserve our sympathy or support, particularly with things like that carbon pipeline that I showed earlier that is a potential for destroying, killing communities. It could be a community killer. I mean, it's just not the farm where the thing's located. Anybody downwind of that thing is at risk. Here's a comment from the great Mary Knox. And I really appreciate this today because I'm carrying the show, folks. Mary says CO2 freezes everything on contact as it blows out. Initially, downwind, it settles into low lying areas, so it won't easily dissipate. It will be difficult to seal out or even shelter from. So I think what she's trying to say there. Yeah, let me bring this up on screen because it's like, well, this isn't going to happen, George. The hell it ain't. It already has. Here it is in Mississippi. I've had this on screen before. This is what this thing looks like. This one ruptured down there. Pipelines all rupture. They all leak. They're all poisonous. And it's just a matter of degree, really. And it's certainly as dangerous as an oil pipeline, and maybe more so. At least you know where the oil is. You can find it. You can't do much about it. You can try to, you know, clean it up with Dawn dish soap, wipe off some pelicans and some birds like they always show us when it washes ashore, but it's there forever. I mean, it doesn't go anywhere. You can burn it, and hello, East Palestine. You can't burn this stuff, I don't think. I mean, this is what we're looking at. I give that a look. Here's a sign to give you just an idea of how hazardous it is. It's not an exaggeration. We're not making this thing up. They put these pipelines on. These signs go up, folks. It's potentially deadly. It's lethal. And carbon dioxide can cause injury or death. Yeah. And I think it also can cause sugar. I tell people all the time the reason that we're so dumb in this country, the reason that we can't protect ourselves any better than the dinosaurs could protect themselves from an asteroid hit, could be because there's already an unbelievable amount of CO2 in the atmosphere. We're breathing it. And scientific studies have determined that this stuff causes cognitive decline. So tune on Fox, watch that stuff. Watch the next Trump rally. Watch people speak. Watch the microphone stuck in the faces and try to believe that we're really like that. Could it be? Possibly because of the CO2. Maybe it's either that or something I said on the show, last one show with the great Bill Astor. Either that or the largest demographic in American society, the boomers. I think it's still the biggest. I don't know. A lot of them are dying, but we're talking this huge demographic. They got old. You know, they turned 50 plus, 60, 70 years old, 80. They're still presidents. They're still running the world. Well, what happens? Yeah, you get dementia, folks. And I think people are preying on this older demographic that hasn't got all their marbles, it seems to me like. I can't believe that we're doing what we're doing. And part of that is these CO2 pipelines. We're really going to do this? Yeah. These things look like they've got the inside track for coming online. And that's what the Sioux City Journal article was talking about here. And here is the ending paragraph to that thing. Progressives sought for months, so this is from Common Dreams, to dissuade Joe Biden from approving ConocoPhillips' $8 billion Willow project. We were going to talk about that with Emma, noting that it can enable the production of more than 600 million barrels of crude over 30 years. If all that oil is burned, nearly 280 million metric tons of heat-trapping carbon dioxide emissions will be spewed into the atmosphere at a time when United Nations Security General Antonio Guterres warns that the planet is reaching a point of no return. And that's probably the biggest issue here is that it's resulting in us taking our eyes off of the ball. We're looking at short-term financial gain for special interest groups, like I mentioned earlier. And then you've got these climate scientists, which people say they believe, but they don't seem to understand how grave their warning. They're not taking their lead. We're opening up more drilling in the Arctic. We're approving CO2 pipelines to aid the production of ethanol here in the state of Iowa. This stuff is killing us all. It's going to be game over, folks, if we don't step in, stop this, and make these corporations and these big moneyed interests look elsewhere, like maybe a green alternative. What a concept that would be. How about a clean burning alternative fuel of some type? They have the resources. They have the best scientists that money can buy. Stop them from doing this this Rube Gold project running Iowa, South Dakota, and let's see, I think maybe a little bit of it goes to Nebraska, but anyway, Iowa and South Dakota mostly, and maybe they'll turn their attention elsewhere. But if we don't, they're just going to continue. Now it's in the Iowa legislature. It's gone through the House. It's pending approval in the Senate. A lot of people in the Republican-controlled Iowa Senate. Going to be tough sledding, folks. Probably not going to happen. We're probably not going to be able to stop the golden rule from prevailing. Mary says that, in addition, you won't be able to get vehicles into the area. The engines require oxygen to fire up. Concentrated CO2 displaces oxygen. Vehicles will stall out. Yeah, it's incredible. It's science fiction stuff. You just need to look into it further and then ask yourself whether or not you want it on your farm, near your community, or even in your state. Well, that's going to do it, folks. I'm not going to prolong this any longer. We'll get Emma on to talk about this because it is, and legislative stuff tends to be like this. It's why I don't cover it very much, because it's a kind of a never-ending story. If you don't have it on today, there'll be another story next week, and we can revisit this with Emma Schmit. So I'm going to encourage everybody, like I always do at the end of my shows, to go to podcastbygeorge.com and sign up. We need your viewership. We need your eyeballs. We need your patronage. Questions and comments like those by the great Mary Knox. Those are great. I mean, leave me a comment on YouTube. That'd be wonderful. Give us a thumbs up, ring the notification bell, and you'll be notified each time a live stream comes on YouTube. This also streams live in video on Facebook. And all you got to do there is like us, follow us, I think, share it. That's huge. Get these video streams in the hands of other people that need to learn stuff, so that we don't become, more slaves to toothpick makers. Here, take a look at this. CO2 pipelines. When I see that, I think of trees. My God, trees are the solution to this, folks. Plant millions of trees. Why not? I mean, they capture carbon probably better than these pipelines do, because that's not settled science. I mean, whether or not these things work at all, despite poisoning, it has yet to be determined. We know that the trees work. That's scientific fact. Let's give that a try. Anyway, like I said, thanks again for everybody joining me today on this Sunday morning. We'll be back very soon. We've got the great Brad Wolf coming on from the peace group out there. He's going to be talking about the situation in Syria with Iran, Russia, China. I mean, it's getting really weird out there, folks. He's going to be back on tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. Central Time, I think. Might be 11 o'clock Central Time. Anyway, watch for the notifications. But that's going to do it. That's going to wrap it up. That's all there is, and there ain't no more. That's another podcast by George.